It is late evening when Hannah finds herself at Rachel's house, surrounded by the soft hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the easy laughter of old friends. The warmth of the living room, with its dim golden lamps and half-finished bottles of wine scattered across the coffee table, feels familiar and safe. Hannah, ever the observer, is perched on the edge of the couch, sketchbook tucked away in her bag, more comfortable listening than dominating the flow of dialogue. Rachel, radiant and animated, moves effortlessly around the room, the kind of hostess who makes everyone feel like the center of attention. But Hannah's gaze keeps drifting toward Ethan. Rachel's husband commands the space without trying. His voice cuts through the chatter, low and magnetic, his stories polished with just enough self-deprecating humor to disarm. At first, Hannah tells herself she's only noticing because she is protective of Rachel, always watching to make sure her friend is treated well. But then, Ethan lingers when he speaks to her, his eyes locking onto hers with unnerving steadiness, as if he is seeing her not just politely acknowledging Rachel's best friend. A brush of his hand when he passes her a glass, a pause too long when their laughter overlaps, a silence that somehow feels louder than words. All of it adds up to something Hannah doesn't want to name. She convinces herself it's her imagination, that she's reading too much into it. After all, Ethan is married to Rachel, her closest confidant, the person she trusts most. And yet, beneath the comfort of the gathering, a thin thread of unease winds itself into Hannah's chest, tightening with every glance that lasts just a beat too long. As the evening winds down, most of the guests have drifted away into the cool night, leaving the house quieter, shadows stretching longer across the floor. Rachel disappears into the kitchen to put away leftovers, and Hannah offers to help with the cleanup. She gathers empty glasses and wine-stained napkins, moving methodically to keep her hands busy, determined to brush away the odd tension she has felt all night. Ethan joins her, carrying plates from the dining room. Their movements overlap in the small space, close enough that Hannah feels the warmth of his presence. At first, nothing seems unusual to people tidying up after a gathering. But then, as she reaches for a dish, Ethan leans in, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You deserve someone who sees you," not just as Rachel's friend. The words land with the force of a sudden storm. For a moment, Hannah freezes, unable to breathe, her pulse pounding in her ears. The room seems to tilt, the casualness of the night shattering in an instant. She can't tell if she's more horrified by what he said, or by the strange, forbidden spark it ignites deep within her. The kitchen feels impossibly small now, his presence overwhelming, the walls pressing closer. She tries to rationalize, to convince herself she misheard, that maybe he meant it platonically. But the quiet intensity in his eyes makes denial impossible. This isn't a mistake. He meant it. And with those 7 words, Ethan has crossed a line she never thought possible. 1,000 thoughts slam through Hannah's mind in the silence that follows. Fear, guilt, and disbelief all crash into one another, tangled with something she is most ashamed to admit, the faint flicker of temptation. For years, she has been the loyal friend, the careful listener, the one who steps back so Rachel can shine. She has never allowed herself to even consider Ethan in any way other than Rachel's husband. And yet now, his words cling to her like smoke, impossible to shake off. She feels the weight of betrayal heavy in her chest, betrayal not only of Rachel, but of herself, of her values, of the friendship that has anchored her since college. Every instinct screams at her to run, to distance herself before something irreversible happens. Without another word, she sets down the glass in her hand and murmurs a quick excuse, avoiding his eyes. Her breath is shallow as she grabs her coat, each step toward the door feeling heavier than the last. The night air hits her face like a slap, cool and sharp, but it does nothing to calm the racing of her heart. She walks quickly, almost stumbling as she makes her way to her car, fumbling for the keys with trembling fingers. Inside, she sits in silence, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. She knows what just happened will not fade easily. It will linger in every glance, every word, every memory of tonight. Worse, it will haunt her not just as Ethan's betrayal, but as her own private burden. For in that moment, when his words hung between them, she didn't only feel shock. She felt seen, and that dangerous recognition terrifies her more than anything else. Hannah's life, on the surface, looks orderly, even enviable. At 28, she has carved out a modest career as a graphic designer, working from a small but cozy apartment that she has carefully curated with secondhand furniture, warm lighting, and splashes of her own artwork. To the outside world, she seems independent, creative, and free. But beneath the surface lies a gnawing emptiness she cannot quite silence. Her last relationship, a 3-year romance she believed would end in marriage, collapsed spectacularly when her partner left her for someone else. The betrayal carved into her a wound that has yet to heal fully. Now, evenings stretch into long, echoing silences, her only company the hum of her laptop or the faint music drifting from her headphones. She often works late, not because deadlines demand it, but because it distracts her from the hollowness of coming home to no one. Loneliness presses against her ribs, sharp and insistent, reminding her of what she lost. In quiet moments, when she glances at her reflection in the mirror, she wrestles with questions of worth. Am I enough? Am I lovable? Did he leave because something in me was lacking? The ache of these doubts lingers, a silent undertow beneath the daily rhythm of her life. She dreams of love, of being chosen and cherished, but the very idea feels both urgent and impossibly far away. If there is one steady light in Hannah's life, it is Rachel. Their friendship was forged in the messines of college late-night cram sessions, heartbreaks, and the kind of shared laughter that stitches two people together like family. Rachel is more than a best friend. She is Hannah's anchor, her confidant, the person who has seen her at her most broken. Years ago, when Hannah's last relationship unraveled, it was Rachel who showed up with takeout and a blanket, who sat through nights of tears without judgment, who reminded Hannah that she was still whole even when she felt shattered. That kind of loyalty branded itself into Hannah's heart, deepening their bond into something sacred, almost sisterly. To betray Rachel in any form feels unthinkable, almost like betraying herself. Their lives have diverged in recent years, Rachel into the polished world of marriage and stability, Hannah into the messy independence of singlehood, but the connection remains unshaken. Hannah visits Rachel's house often, finding comfort in the warmth of a home that feels alive in ways hers does not. She envies, but also treasures, the life Rachel has built. In quiet moments, when she watches Rachel laugh with Ethan or fuss over the little details of their home, Hannah feels both joy for her friend and a subtle pang of longing. Rachel represents the kind of life Hannah secretly yearns for, secure, grounded, loved. Their friendship, however, makes that yearning dangerous, because to step across that invisible line, even in thought, would not only threaten Rachel's trust, but dismantle the one relationship Hannah cannot afford to lose. From the outside, Rachel and Ethan appear to have everything: a stylish home, comfortable careers, the kind of effortless charm that makes them a couple others admire. But Hannah, with the eyes of someone who knows Rachel intimately, notices the hairline fractures. She has seen Ethan cut Rachel off mid-sentence with a dismissive smirk, has caught the fleeting shadow in Rachel's eyes when she forces a laugh a second too late. Rachel never complains, but Hannah senses the subtle dissonance beneath the polished exterior. That tension unsettles her, though she tells herself it is not her place to interfere. Instead, she files away the observations, uneasy yet silent. At the same time, her admiration for their marriage flawed, though it may be gnaws at her. It represents what she craves most: a partnership, a sense of being chosen and secure. When Ethan's attention veers unexpectedly toward her, it slices through Hannah with devastating force. On one hand, it stirs the darkest kind of guilt, a betrayal of Rachel and of the sacred bond between them. On the other, it ignites something she hasn't felt in years: the dangerous thrill of being seen, desired, wanted. It forces her to confront questions she has long buried. Is it wrong to want intimacy, even if it comes from the wrong place? Does her loneliness make her vulnerable to what she should reject? That internal tug of war between loyalty and longing threatens to unravel her carefully constructed life. For Hannah, the stakes are unbearably high. To indulge in Ethan's attention risks destroying her friendship, her sense of self, and the fragile foundation of trust that her world rests upon. Yet to resist means confronting the hollow ache of her solitude, a reality she fears might consume her if she remains unseen forever. Hannah tries to distance herself after that night, convincing herself it was a lapse in judgment she can forget. She avoids Rachel's invitations with vague excuses, claims of deadlines, fatigue, errands she cannot postpone. Yet the harder she tries to put space between them, the more Ethan fills her thoughts. His words replay in her head like His words replay in her head like a haunting refrain. You deserve someone who sees you. She tells herself she hates him for saying it, for jeopardizing her friendship with Rachel, for crossing a line he had no right to approach. And yet, deep in the quiet hours, she feels the pull. The hollow loneliness that has been her constant companion suddenly feels sharper now that someone has awakened the possibility of being wanted. That temptation turns unbearable when Ethan begins texting her. At first, the messages are harmless, small, casual check-ins, comments about work, or a joke from the gathering. But late at night, the tone shifts. He asks how she is doing, tells her he can't stop thinking about their conversation, sends her words meant to slip under her skin. Hannah knows she should ignore them, block him, cut off contact altogether. But she doesn't. Instead, she stares at the screen, heart pounding, caught between dread and anticipation. Their exchanges remain hidden, a secret thread that binds them, blurring the boundary she swore she would never cross. Each text becomes a dangerous spark, illuminating just how fragile her loyalty feels in the face of her longing. As if fate is mocking her, Rachel begins to confide in Hannah more than ever. Over coffee in Hannah's apartment, Rachel's mask slips, revealing the strain she has been carrying. Her voice cracks when she admits Ethan has grown distant, that their conversations feel shallow, that she sometimes wonders if he is already slipping away from her. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, Rachel whispers, clutching her mug like it's the only solid thing in her hands. She laughs too quickly, brushing off the confession, but her eyes betray the weight of her fear. Hannah's chest tightens painfully, the guilt nearly suffocating her. She knows what Rachel does not, that Ethan has already crossed a boundary, that his attention has shifted in ways Rachel cannot imagine. Every word Rachel shares feels like a knife twisting deeper, a reminder of the loyalty Hannah owes her friend. But mixed with the guilt is another, more poisonous thought. If Ethan is already distant, if Rachel already suspects infidelity, then maybe Hannah isn't the one destroying their marriage. Maybe she's only caught in the cracks of something that was already breaking. That rationalization terrifies her, even as it tempts her, because it offers a dangerous excuse. When Rachel leans on her, asking for advice, Hannah nods and murmurs reassurances, hating herself for the lies. She should confess, should end this charade, but instead she listens and comforts, all while drowning in the storm she cannot reveal. But tension comes to a breaking point at a dinner party. Hannah almost doesn't attend, but Rachel insists, her excitement contagious as she arranges the seating and fusses over details. By the time Hannah arrives, the house hums with conversation and laughter. She tries to melt into the crowd, but the moment Ethan enters the room, her body betrays her heart quickening, skin prickling with awareness. Across the long dining table, their eyes meet for a fraction too long. He doesn't smile, but the look is enough, a silent acknowledgement of everything unsaid between them. Hannah forces herself to look away, laughing at a story another guest tells, but she feels the heat of Ethan's gaze like a hand on her skin. Rachel, radiant and oblivious, beams beside him, pouring wine and leaning into his arm as if nothing is amiss. The contrast is unbearable. Rachel's trust, Ethan's duplicity, Hannah's silent complicity. Every clink of silverware feels amplified, every glance across the table a thread pulled tighter. When Ethan casually brushes her hand while passing a dish, Hannah nearly drops her fork. Her guilt roars inside her, but so does the intoxicating rush of being desired. She chews mechanically, barely tasting the food, wishing she could disappear and yet unable to resist looking at him again. By the time dessert is served, she feels trapped in a cage of her own making, the walls closing in as her double life threatens to unravel. The stakes have never felt higher, and the tension has never been so unbearable. The dinner party winds down, laughter fading into the late-night quiet. Guests shuffle their goodbyes, Rachel lingering at the doorway with warm hugs, her voice still bright with hostess energy. Hannah, jittery and desperate to leave, slips into the hallway to grab her coat. But Ethan is already there, waiting. His presence fills the narrow space, blocking her path, his eyes burning with a mix of frustration and hunger. "Stop pretending," he hisses, his voice low but sharp, like a knife sliding between her ribs. "I know you feel this too. I can't take the games anymore." Hannah shakes her head, her throat dry, every instinct screaming at her to push past him. But before she can, he steps closer, his hand brushing her arm, his face leaning in. The air between them crackles with danger. Hannah freezes, torn between shoving him away and collapsing under the weight of his intensity. Then it happens, the moment she has dreaded and secretly feared. Ethan leans in to kiss her. And just as his lips nearly graze hers, a gasp cuts through the silence. Hannah jerks back, horror flooding her veins as she sees Rachel standing at the edge of the hallway, her face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. For a heartbeat, the world stops, 3 lives suspended in a single catastrophic second. Rachel's voice cracks like shattered glass. "What the hell is this?" The brightness she carried all evening is gone, replaced by a raw devastation that slices through the room. Hannah stumbles forward, hands raised, her words tumbling out in broken fragments. "Rachel, it's not what you think, I never..." But Ethan interrupts, his mask slipping into cold self-preservation. "She's been chasing me, Rachel. She wouldn't leave me alone. I tried to ignore it, but the lie hits harder than the kiss." Rachel reels, staring between them, betrayal twisting her features. Hannah's chest caves in under the weight of it. She shakes her head violently, tears already spilling. "No, that's not true. Rachel, I swear, I never wanted this. I should have cut it off when he started, but I didn't. That's my failure. I let it go too far. But I never wanted to hurt you." The room vibrates with silence after her confession, every word carving deeper into the already broken trust between them. Rachel's hands tremble as she grips the doorframe, her best friend and her husband standing before her as strangers, conspirators, destroyers of her world. The betrayal doesn't just sting, it detonates. When Rachel finally speaks again, her voice is low, ragged, but laced with a fury Hannah has never heard before. "Do you think this is the first time? That you're the first?" Ethan's eyes flicker with guilt, but he says nothing. Rachel lets out a hollow laugh, the sound of a woman who has been bleeding quietly for far too long. "He's cheated before. I knew. I thought if I held on tight enough, if I smiled enough, If I pretended enough, maybe he'd stop. Maybe he'd love me again. And all this time, you were the one person I trusted, the one person who was supposed to protect me. And you. Her voice breaks, then hardens, sharp as steel. You stayed silent. Hannah collapses inward, her body shaking, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. She wants to explain, to beg forgiveness, but the words choke in her throat. Rachel doesn't give her the chance. "You're dead to me," she spits, her voice trembling with rage and grief. "Both of you, get out of my life." Ethan storms out, muttering curses, slamming the door behind him, but Hannah barely hears him. The only sound that matters is Rachel's sobs, each one a nail sealing the coffin of their friendship. And then the silence final, unrelenting. Hannah stands frozen in the wreckage, hollow and ruined, her greatest fear realized. She has lost everything, her best friend, her anchor, her chosen family. Betrayed by Ethan, consumed by guilt, undone by her own silence. Months pass, and the storm leaves Hannah standing in silence. The fallout from that night reshaped her life in ways she could not have imagined. Rachel refuses all contact, her calls go unanswered, her messages unread. The absence of her best friend is a raw, gaping wound, one that stings every morning when Hannah instinctively reaches for her phone to share something and then remembers there is no one on the other end anymore. Ethan predictably abandoned the wreckage. Within weeks, whispers of his filing for divorce spread through mutual circles. Though Hannah makes no attempt to track the details, she doesn't want them. What gnaws at her most is not losing Ethan. His memory barely lingers, but the fact that she became part of Rachel's undoing. Loneliness, once a dull ache, now feels sharp and deserved, the consequence of silence and weakness. Yet in the quiet of her apartment, she slowly realizes this devastation is also a mirror. It forces her to look inward, to confront the fractures that have lived inside her long before Ethan ever spoke those first dangerous words. It is therapy that finally gives Hannah a language for her pain. She sits in the soft-lit room across from a therapist who doesn't flinch when Hannah admits the ugliest truths. That she didn't stop Ethan when she should have. That she craved his attention because it made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt since her last breakup. She begins to trace patterns, how years of seeking validation in relationships left her vulnerable to anyone who offered the illusion of being seen. The therapist challenges her to sit with the discomfort, to ask not just why Ethan, but why the void inside her was so easy for him to slip into. It is agonizing work, unearthing pieces of herself she has long ignored. The loneliness she numbed with late-night work, the doubts she drowned in comparison to Rachel's seemingly perfect life, the part of her that equated being wanted with being worthy. Slowly, she starts sketching again, not for clients, not for deadlines, but for herself. Each line on the page feels like reclaiming a fragment of identity, proof that she can create something out of emptiness. In those moments, she begins to believe that healing doesn't come from someone else's gaze, but from her own. When Hannah finally picks up her pen to write to Rachel, it is not an act of desperation, but of acceptance. The letter is long, handwritten, raw. She doesn't justify, doesn't beg, doesn't weave excuses. Instead, she lays herself bare, acknowledging the betrayal, admitting the silence that cut deeper than any kiss, taking full responsibility for the damage she caused. She tells Rachel that she is sorry, not in a way that demands forgiveness, but in a way that honors Rachel's pain. She ends the letter with a quiet promise that she will carry this lesson, that she will not run from herself again, and that Rachel owes her nothing. Dropping the envelope into the mailbox, Hannah feels both grief and relief, as if she has finally released a stone she has been dragging for too long. She doesn't know if Rachel will ever read it, or if their bond can ever be mended. But for the first time in months, Hannah doesn't measure her worth by Rachel's response or Ethan's betrayal. She measures it by the steps she has taken toward herself, her art on the walls again, her voice steadier, her solitude no longer suffocating but slowly transforming into space where she can breathe. The road ahead is uncertain, but she has begun to walk it on her own terms. And that, at last, is enough. A year later, the air feels different for Hannah. The weight of shame and guilt hasn't vanished, but it has softened into something she can carry without breaking. Tonight, her name is printed on the small white placards beneath a row of paintings, her first public showcase as an artist. The gallery hums with the voices of strangers, curators, art lovers, students wandering with wine glasses and hand pausing to study the stories she has spilled onto canvas. Her work, raw and unflinching, does not disguise her journey. One piece shows a woman reaching for a flame that threatens to burn her. Another depicts hands clutching a mask, half fallen, revealing eyes filled with regret. The themes are unmistakable: temptation, guilt, resilience. And yet there's light threaded through each frame, lines of gold breaking through storm clouds, figures stepping forward despite the wreckage behind them. For Hannah, the night is not about validation, but about survival made visible. Standing in the center of the gallery, she feels for the first time that her pain has transformed into something meaningful, something that belongs not only to her, but to anyone who has ever stumbled and fought to rise again. As Hannah greets a couple admiring one of her favorite pieces, movement at the doorway catches her eye. Her breath falters. Rachel stands there, framed by the white walls and soft lighting, her presence both familiar and unbearably distant. She doesn't move further inside, doesn't call Hannah's name. Instead, she lingers in the threshold, eyes scanning the gallery until they land on the paintings. For a long, suspended moment, Rachel simply watches, her expression unreadable, softened only by the faintest glimmer of recognition. Hannah's pulse races, her heart torn between hope and fear. She doesn't approach. She doesn't dare. This isn't her moment to reclaim. But then Rachel does something small, almost imperceptible. She gives Hannah the faintest nod, a gesture subtle it could be missed by anyone else. To Hannah, it feels monumental, like the crack of light breaking through a door that has been locked for too long. And then Rachel turns, slipping silently back into the night, leaving behind nothing but the echo of that fragile acknowledgement. Hannah doesn't chase her. She lets her go, knowing that whatever forgiveness may come, if it ever does, cannot be forced. But that nod is enough to remind her that healing exists, even if it's incomplete. When the gallery quiets, Hannah finds herself standing before the final piece of the night, her most personal work. It depicts a lone woman between two looming shadows, one dark and one gray, both reaching for her. But the woman does not remain in their grip. Her body angles forward, walking toward a horizon painted in soft, radiant light. Hannah stares at the canvas, absorbing its message as if for the first time. She pulls her journal from her bag, pen hovering before she begins to write the words she has carried all year. Temptation nearly destroyed me, but surviving it, owning my flaws, taught me who I am. Love built on betrayal never lasts, but self-respect does. Closing the journal, she exhales, a quiet smile touching her lips. The gallery is nearly empty now, the hum of voices replaced by silence, but she doesn't feel alone. Not anymore. She has rebuilt something within herself that no one can take away. She straightens her shoulders, letting the weight of the past rest where it belongs, and steps closer to her favorite painting. The light in the artwork mirrors the light in her now fragile, imperfect, but steady. And as she stands there, framed by her own creation, the closing image is not of loss, but of a woman choosing, finally, to walk toward the light.